England, and Boris Johnson says he's very optimistic that COVID restrictions can be lifted by June, but warned nothing can be guaranteed. And speaking as he visited a London school, the Prime Minister also promised a review into COVID status certificates or vaccine passports, which could allow people to visit pubs and theatres and take holidays abroad.
I'm hopeful, but obviously nothing can be guaranteed, and it all depends on the way we continue to be prudent and continue to follow the guidance in each stage. And that's why it's so important to proceed in the cautious way that we are. I think people do understand it. They can see the logic of what we're trying to do. But genuinely, because of the immense possibilities now of the vaccination rollout, because science has given us this way of creating a shield around our population, we can really look at that June 21st date with some optimism. I think that's how I put it. That I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to get that.
Boris Johnson there. Our chief political correspondent John Craig is in Westminster. And John, fast becoming a big issue for the government is this vaccine passport question. Where is the government on that? Because it did seem a week or two ago that they were saying there were no plans for vaccine passports.
Well, what the Prime Minister has said today, he's announced that Michael Gove, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Cabinet Office Minister, is been put in charge of trying to work up a policy on this, leading a review into the idea, the Prime Minister said. But what appears to have happened based on what the Prime Minister said today, is that the government appears to have been bounced into it. Yes, as you say, they've been reluctant to do it. Some ministers have ruled it out in interviews. But today, what the Prime Minister said that was telling was, he said it was more likely to be introduced with regards to international travel, as other countries will probably make proof of a jab a requirement. He said when you look at the international side of things, there's no question a lot of countries will be going that way. So looks as though the government's been dragged reluctantly down this road by other countries, European countries, holiday destinations wanting some sort of proof that somebody's had a jab. Whether you call it vaccine passports, he smiled when that was put to him today, or certificates of immunisation, the government prefers to call them. They're a bit more of a mouthful. It looks as though they are on the way in some form for foreign travel. Not just foreign travel though, also big commercial companies are looking at the idea of introducing their own demands for people to prove they've had a vaccination, whether it's big concerts, sporting events, entertainment venues, or even pubs and restaurants and so on. So it looks as though the government's been forced into doing this. I suppose you could say it's yet another U-turn because they didn't want to do it a few weeks ago, but it does look as though it's very much underway now that Mr. Johnson has announced that he's got Michael Gove working up a policy trying to make it work. The government is instinctively against any form of ID card or anything like that. The Tories oppose those when Labour are in government, but Mr. Johnson seems to be moving round reluctantly to bringing them in, although he's worried about, as he says, discrimination against those people who haven't had the vaccine.
Okay, John, thanks very much indeed. Let's just take a look at the latest data from the government. And 8,489 new cases of COVID-19 have been reported. And by the way, that's the lowest daily figure since October the 2nd. A further 548 people are reported to have died, taking the total number of deaths to 121,305, and 17.9 million people have now had a first dose of a coronavirus vaccine. Now, the Prime Minister has told the UN Security Council that climate change could undermine global security if it's not tackled immediately. And speaking at the same event, Sir David Attenborough warned that it's now too late to avoid climate change, but he has called on governments across the world to act on what he calls the biggest threat we face.
Please make no mistake. Climate change is the biggest threat to security that modern humans have ever faced. I don't envy you the responsibility that this places on all of you and your governments. We have left the stable and secure climatic period that gave birth to our civilizations. There is no going back. No matter what we do now, it's too late to avoid climate change. And the poorest and most vulnerable, those with the least security, are now certain to suffer.